Last night, everything changed because what looked like an apology turned into a jaw-dropping moment that exposed power control and a shocking belief that only one man could release women who already left him. And when David stepped in, the entire narrative cracked wide open. You are not going to believe how intense this gets, so watch until the end. And if you love real, unfiltered breakdowns like this, hit subscribe right now and join the fastest growing community on YouTube, because you do not want to miss what is coming next. Last night did not feel like a routine reality television episode. It felt like a curtain being pulled back on beliefs that have been simmering under the surface for years. And what made it so gripping was not shouting or chaos, but the calm certainty with which Cody framed himself as the spiritual authority over relationships that had already ended. He did not simply apologize. He positioned his apology as a sacred act, as though he alone possessed the power to release women who had already chosen to leave and rebuild their lives. And the moment he used language suggesting that freedom required his declaration, something shifted, because viewers could sense that this was not about regret, this was about ownership. And when he spoke about needing to release them, it carried the tone of someone who believed that their autonomy was still tethered to his approval, even though Christine had moved on, remarried, and created a new life. And the tension grew heavier when he implied that expressing lingering love was a healing gesture, because in any normal context, telling an ex-spouse that you still love them in front of their current husband does not sound like closure. It sounds like confusion and possibly an attempt to reframe history. And that is where David entered the scene, not with aggression, but with clarity. He watched, he listened, and when he responded, it was grounded in logic rather than spiritual abstraction. He understood that words matter, especially when they blur boundaries, and he was not willing to accept the idea that enlightenment meant tolerating language that undermines a current marriage. And what made the exchange even more layered was the subtle reinforcement from Robin, who suggested that a more educated or enlightened person would see the healing intent behind Cody's words. And that comment deepened the divide, because it implied that disagreement equals ignorance rather than a difference in perspective. And viewers could feel the shift from simple disagreement to something more ideological, a clash between spiritual superiority and practical accountability. And as Suki attempted to navigate the conversation, it began to feel less like an interview and more like mediation between two entirely different worldviews, one that believed intention outweighs impact, and one that insisted impact is what truly defines respect. And the more Cody doubled down on his belief that he had to perform this spiritual act to free them, the more it sounded like he was centering himself in a story that no longer revolved around him. And that is what kept audiences glued to the screen, because the question lingered in every pause. If this was truly about healing, then why did it feel like a performance of authority? And why did every explanation circle back to his role as the decisive figure in their emotional freedom? And when he confidently stated that if he wanted to tell Christine he loved her, he would, it did not land as romantic or profound. It landed as dismissive of the boundaries that a current marriage requires. And David's reaction was telling. He did not explode, he did not insult, he simply pointed out that common sense dictates that such statements are not harmless, and that maturity involves understanding how words resonate beyond personal intention. And the tension was amplified by the absence of Robin in certain conversations, because if unity and transparency are valued, then why step back during pivotal exchanges? And that question hung in the air, unanswered, reinforcing the perception that the apology might not have been about reconciliation at all, but about controlling the narrative of how history would be remembered. And as viewers processed the exchange, another layer surfaced. The idea that healing does not require permission from someone who once held power in your life. It requires distance, reflection, and consistent respect. And Christine had already demonstrated that by building a new partnership, one rooted in mutual support rather than spiritual hierarchy. And yet Cody's framing suggested that her journey was incomplete without his final blessing. And that contradiction is what fueled the suspense, because it revealed a fundamental difference in how freedom and closure are defined. And as the episode progressed, the conversation expanded beyond personal grievances into a broader contemplation of power and intimacy, and viewers were left with a burning question. If a true apology requires unmazzitti moving on, then can a past fact truly be released without full accountability? Reflection on autonomy, accountability, and the weight of words spoken years after separation. And each time Cody insisted that his motives were misunderstood, it subtly shifted responsibility onto the listeners, implying that their discomfort stemmed from a lack of comprehension rather than from the content of his statements. And that rhetorical pattern kept viewers engaged because it raised the stakes beyond a simple apology. It became a question of who gets to define reality in a shared history. And David's refusal to entertain the spiritual framing was not dismissive. It was protective of the present marriage he shares with Christine, and protective of boundaries that prevent past narratives from intruding into current stability. And as the dialogue circled back to whether expressing past love could help someone heal, the logic faltered, because Christine's departure was rooted in years of dissatisfaction, not in uncertainty about whether she had once been loved. And that distinction mattered, because love declared in hindsight does not erase neglect or distance, and it certainly does not grant the speaker authority over someone else's growth. And what made the episode so compelling was that no one raised their voice, yet the emotional temperature remained high, because certainty clashed with certainty, and neither side yielded ground. And viewers were left watching a collision of philosophies, one built on the belief that intention sanctifies action, and one grounded in the principle that respect is measured by boundaries upheld. And as the credits approached, the unresolved energy lingered, not because of unfinished arguments, but because of unwavering convictions. And the audience could sense that this was only the beginning of a deeper confrontation about perception, power, and personal freedom. And that lingering uncertainty is what ensures viewers will return, because the question remains whether future conversations will move toward mutual understanding or continue to orbit around a belief system that places one person at the center of everyone else's healing journey. As the aftermath of that confrontation settled, what became even more striking was how firmly Cody held to the belief that his perspective was not simply valid, but elevated. And that elevation was not framed as ego, it was framed as spiritual awareness, which made it more difficult to challenge, because when someone positions their viewpoint as divinely inspired, disagreement can be dismissed as a lack of understanding rather than a legitimate difference of opinion. And that dynamic played out repeatedly as he explained that his words were never meant to disrespect boundaries, but to provide healing, closure, and growth. Yet each time he emphasized his intention, he seemed to overlook the impact those words carried, especially in front of David, who sat there composed, but visibly aware that intention without sensitivity can feel like intrusion. And what kept the tension alive was not anger, but restraint. Because David did not respond with hostility, he responded with measured logic, highlighting that in healthy relationships, respect is demonstrated through actions that honor the present, rather than revisiting the emotional language of the past. And that distinction created a quiet but undeniable contrast between the two men, one focused on spiritual narrative and one grounded in practical partnership. And as the discussion turned toward the idea of education and enlightenment, Robin's suggestion that a broader or more enlightened mind would recognize the healing power of Cody's statements seemed to reinforce the perception that disagreement equaled deficiency. And that subtle framing intensified the divide because it implied that acceptance was a measure of growth rather than a matter of personal boundaries. And viewers could sense that this was no longer about a single apology. It was about worldview and authority, about who gets to define closure and who gets to determine when someone else is free. And when Cody reiterated that he could express love in the present tense if he chose to, it underscored the tension between personal freedom of speech and relational responsibility, Because while anyone can say what they feel, not every feeling needs to be voiced, especially when it risks blurring lines that have already been redrawn through divorce and remarriage. And David's steady insistence that logic and common sense should guide behavior resonated with audiences who recognize that maturity often means choosing restraint over impulse. And what made the exchange even more layered was the recurring absence of Robin during pivotal conversations, which prompted questions about transparency and unity. If polygamy was once described as shared life and collective responsibility, why step back when discussions become complex? And that absence added another layer of intrigue, suggesting that the apology may have been less about family reconciliation and more about personal image management. And as Suki attempted to facilitate understanding between perspectives, the conversation sometimes felt like translation between two languages, one built on spiritual symbolism and one built on everyday relational norms. And the more Cody framed himself as misunderstood, the more it appeared that accountability was being redirected rather than embraced, because claiming misinterpretation subtly shifts focus away from self-reflection and onto the audience's comprehension. And that rhetorical move kept viewers analyzing every word, every pause, every glance, searching for signs of genuine humility or subtle defensiveness. And beneath it all lingered the broader question of autonomy, because when someone suggests that another adult requires their release to move forward, it raises concerns about lingering control, even if that control is expressed through metaphor rather than mandate. And Christine's life choices already demonstrated independence. She remarried, she established new routines, she built a partnership with David rooted in mutual respect. And yet the language of release implied that her story was incomplete without Cody's final acknowledgement. And that implication is what kept the suspense simmering, because it suggested that the struggle was not over shared property or custody, but over narrative ownership, over who gets to define the meaning of the past. And as the episode progressed, viewers saw that this was not a battle of volume, but of philosophy, each statement revealing how deeply ingrained beliefs shape interpretation and reaction. And while Cody maintained that his heart was in the right place, the consistent return to his central role in everyone else's healing journey reinforced the perception that self-importance and spirituality were intertwined in his worldview. And David's refusal to validate that framework did not come across as ignorance, it came across as boundary setting, as a husband unwilling to allow language that could destabilize the emotional security of his marriage. And that quiet firmness became one of the most compelling aspects of the episode, because it demonstrated that strength does not require shouting, it requires clarity and consistency. And as the conversation circled back once more to whether past declarations of love could mend wounds created by years of distance, the logic faltered again. Because healing rarely arrives through a single statement, it grows through sustained change, accountability, and respect. And viewers were left contemplating whether the apology was truly about mending relationships or about reshaping public perception. And as credits approached, the unresolved tension remained. Not because issues were left unspoken, but because convictions remained unshaken, leaving audiences anticipating the next installment, wondering if deeper reflection will emerge, or if the divide between spiritual authority and grounded partnership will widen even further in the episodes to come. What we witnessed was not just an apology, it was a battle over power, perception, and who truly controls the narrative of the past. And if this episode proved anything, it is that words without accountability only create more questions. And next week looks even more explosive, so make sure you are here for it. And if you want bold, honest breakdowns that do not miss a single detail, hit subscribe right now and join the growing community, because the real story is just getting started.